Good evening. This is the 8th annual Campagnola Lecture on Restorative Justice, brought to you by the Community Justice Center and our partners, North Island College and Comox Valley Schools. North Island College, as part of its commitment to reconciliation with First Nations, has recently initiated a Kwakwala language class. So, as a first-time student of Kwakwala, I am very pleased, after only 2 weeks of full instruction, to be able to say to you, Gela Kasla, Nugwa am Bruce Curtis, Ola Galas Ikwa Nala. Welcome. My name is Bruce Curtis. You are looking very well today. Thank you for coming. And now I would like to invite Donna Mitchell, Comox First Nation Elder, to extend the official welcome to the traditional territories of the Comox First Nation.
Good evening. I had no idea what I said yes to when I accepted this, and anyhow, I'm here. I call upon the Creator, the Great Spirit, to bless the meeting tonight. I ask the Creator that the work be guided by the Great Spirit of generosity. I do so with respect. Gela Kasla, I welcome you. I am Donna Mitchell, Comox First Nation Elder. I come from a long line of hereditary chiefs. This evening I welcome you to the Comox First Nation traditional unceded territories. Our identity has been shaped by our ancestors for thousands of years. Walk gently, with highest honors and respects. Thank you.
And now to welcome you on behalf of the Community Justice Center, the president of CJC, Heather Ney.
Good evening, guests and community leaders. I am delighted to welcome you on behalf of the Community Justice Center to the 8th annual Campagnola Lecture in Restorative Justice. It is a pleasure to see such a large and diverse audience in this year's lecture. The Campagnola Lectures are the premier event of the CJC's annual calendar of events, and it is the highlight of our work in public education around the issues of restorative justice. The CJC has been working for many years to bring resolution and reconciliation to the people of the Comox Valley. This year, we are celebrating the completion of 20 years of service in our community. As a community-based, volunteer-run organization, we are proud of all that we have been able to accomplish. This year, we have invited our lecturer, a strong and powerful woman who has been promoted through the ranks to achieve its top position, Commissioner of the RCMP. She has publicly declared her mandate is to assist the force to live up to its proud history while helping and leading it to modernize and reform some practices, ensuring it becomes a diversity-affirming and inclusive police force. This will necessitate some real change in certain areas. This is hard work, and I support the work that she has taken on. Restorative justice is the very heart of what we do. Across every aspect of our wide-ranging programs of work, we use restorative justice principles to bring harmony to our community by bringing those in conflict to a place of reconciliation. Whether it is a young person who needs to learn accountability for a poor decision, an elder or an adult in conflict with the law, the victim of elder abuse, or one whose life has been seriously harmed by an incident involving racism, hatred, or homophobia, the CJC's programs have immense capacity to begin the healing process and restore peace. As an organization, we have over 150 residents of the Comox Valley who diligently serve as dedicated volunteers in this work. And so on behalf of all of us at the Community Justice Center, Welcome to the 8th Annual Campagnola Lecture. Now I would like to call upon John Bowman, President of North Island College, and then Paul Berry, representing the Comox Valley Schools, our partners in this project, to welcome you on behalf of the college and School District 71.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of North Island College, it is indeed a pleasure to welcome you to the 8th Annual Campagnola Lecture in Restorative Justice. As you know, the lectures are co-presented by the Community Justice Center, CJC, and North Island College, and School District 71. We are very proud at NIC to be in this partnership and of our association with the Campagnola Lecture. It has become really a premier event on the Comox Valley's annual community calendar. Previous lectures, most of which I've been fortunate to attend, have been given by a very impressive list of presenters. I think the quality of those lectures have contributed greatly to the prestige of this event and to the contribution it has made to public education and community development in the Comox Valley. In 2018, the college and CJC formalized in writing our joint commitment to the lecture, and I'm proud that the partnership between the college, we've increased our financial support and in-kind contribution to the lecture series, and I hope that it will contribute to its success for many years to come. I want to take this opportunity to commend the CJC board, Administrator Bruce Curtis, and the more than 150 volunteers who provide restorative justice services in the region. Their efforts truly are making our community an even better place to live. Also, it's a wonderful and impressive attendance tonight. Thank you all for coming. Seated among you, of course, are many special guests, and I want to in particular acknowledge members of our North Island College community, members of the board, faculty, and staff who've joined us today. This evening, I'm sure we're going to enjoy a very informative and thought-provoking presentation by RCMP Commissioner Brenda Lucki. And as I said to her this evening, and to the former Justice Minister, and to the Supreme Court Chief Justice, let's hope she doesn't screw it up. Commissioner, thank you for sharing your time and thoughts with us this evening. We appreciate it very much. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of North Island College, thank you for being a part of tonight.
Good evening and welcome. I'm Paul Berry. I am the Director of Instruction, one of the Directors of Instruction responsible for health and safety for the Comox Valley School District. And on behalf of the Board of Trustees, the Superintendent and Senior Managers of the Comox Valley School District, I'd like to welcome you. We have had a very, very positive relationship with the Community Justice Center. And I just wanted to share that this last year we had an event that could very much have changed the life of one of our young youth, an adolescent youth, an event that closed 3 of our schools and created a lot of trauma in the community. As a result of the relationship that the school district and the Community Justice Center and the RCMP had, at the end of the process, what we heard from this young man and his family was, "You've made my son a better person." I don't think that there could be any better recommendation for a process such as restorative justice as that. So I commend the Community Justice Center for the work that they do and look very forward to the presentation tonight. Thank you.
Political life being what it is, Rachel Blaney, our MP for North Island and Powell River, was unable to be here as she had to be in Ottawa for pre-planning exercise related to, I gather, the opening of Parliament next week. Evidently, you plan ahead for those sorts of things rather than just letting them be a surprise. Anyhow, Rachel has sent this greeting to you. I regret that preparations for the coming parliamentary session are preventing me from being with you this evening. It seems the work of the Community Justice Center is more important than ever in educating and advocating for restorative justice in our community. The annual Campagnola Lecture is a wonderful part of that work, and tonight's topic seems particularly timely. I am very glad to have been able to attend several, attend several Campagnola lectures, including last year's talk about the future of the Canadian justice system by then Justice Minister Jody Wilson-Raybould. It is great once again to have a strong woman speaking tonight from a position of power and influence, working at the forefront of the issues in RCMP. I hope this evening's conversation help us all to better understand the challenges we face and help guide us ever forward towards a more just world. And with brief greetings from the other MP, you'll remember that our constituency was divided in two twice, provincially and federally, so that this is our representative from Tofino, Ucluelet, Port Alberni, the Cedar Forest, and of course, Courtenay, Gord Johns.
It's a huge honor to be here on the unceded traditional territory of the Comox people. I want to thank Donna Mitchell for her warm welcome, welcoming us to her territory. It's a huge pleasure to join you, actually, in welcoming Commissioner Lucki to the Comox Valley. On behalf of myself and as Bruce said, my colleague Rachel Blaney, who couldn't make it tonight and is preparing for the upcoming parliamentary session, we are on the territory of the Comox people, as has been already acknowledged, for which I'm also very grateful. Commissioner Lucki, thank you for coming to Vancouver Island. I believe it's your first visit since your appointment, and I hope that you'll come back many times. We've got a lot of work to do here. We know that. And as a Member of Parliament for Courtenay Alberni, may I take this occasion to thank your members who work so hard to keep our communities safe, and I see many of them here, and we are very grateful for the work you do. Restorative justice programs here in the Comox Valley with the RCMP have been historic, and I'm particularly pleased recently with the historic agreement with the Port Alberni RCMP and the Nuu-Chah-Nulth Tribal Council, through which the First Nations clients can now be referred to the Kuasa Nations clients can now be referred to the Kuasa program, which uses traditional, cultural, and spiritual practices to support and promote mental health, healing, and restorative justice. And it's important progress such as this that offers such hope in our communities for real reconciliation with Indigenous peoples. And for this, we owe a huge debt of gratitude to the RCMP and for its ongoing commitment. And I want to thank, of course, the Community Justice Center, Bruce Curtis, and of course, Heather and the work that she's doing, and John at North Island College and SD 71, and the many, many volunteers for arranging for Commissioner Lucki to speak to us this evening. Gela Kasla.
The Community Justice Center is, for reasons which I think are best understood by our community, attractive to many very, very honored people in the community who join us each year for the annual lecture and support us throughout the year in all of the activities we do. So I would like to particularly welcome Chief Darren Blaney of the Hamalko First Nation, Mayor Baird of Cumberland, Mayor Arnott of Comox. Where? Oh, there you are. Mayor Wells of Courtenay, and Regional District Director, where are you? Oh, Edwin Grieve. We are very honored by your presence. We are very honored by your support and encouragement of restorative justice, and we are particularly honored by the next speaker who will introduce Commissioner Lucki. The next speaker is the patron of the Community Justice Center, the Honorable Iona Campagnolo.
It's wonderful to see you. Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you kindly. Was so happy to see you all out for this because I think that a lot of good work has been done by the Community Justice Center, and I'm very proud to be associated with them over such a long period of time. I feel I should tell you that I have a Tsimshian name. It is Noswineach, Mother of the Big Fin, which makes me very interested in the southern resident killer whales. I think we have done wonders in bringing together the understanding that is between the peoples of the past founding and the people who have settled since. It has done a great deal towards a better result. Honored leaders of the Comox Valley, and there are so many of you here tonight, thank you for being with us. I'm delighted and honored to introduce our guest, the first appointed as Commissioner of the RCMP, Brenda Lucki, as the first woman to permanently head RCMP following Beverly Busson, who is now a senator, but who served as Assistant Commissioner. I must say, you know, when I started out, I hesitate to tell you, but about 50 years ago, people thought our voices were too high and our ambitions were too high, and well, who needed women in those positions anyway? Well, thank you all, gentlemen particularly, thank you. Commissioner Lucki has come to office at a time of extraordinary challenges, but also of great opportunities for the Commissioner's leadership of a thoroughgoing modernization of the RCMP's culture and its relationships with the broader community and First Nations. Shortly after her appointment, the deadline for claims under the RCMP settlement of the gender and sexual harassment class action court case in 2017 was extended. Then, in June of last year, a massive class action claim was filed with the courts alleging bullying and harassment claims that could eventually be representing thousands of male and female RCMP officers, civilian staff, and even volunteers going back decades. Earlier this month, the enforcement of the court-ordered injunctions granted to Coastal GasLink TransCanada against the Unistoten camp in unceded Wet'suwet'en territory in northern British Columbia, it's in my old constituency, calling into question Canada's declared policy of reconciliation and illustrating some of Canada's unfinished constitutional work in Section 35 of the Constitution, in which Aboriginal rights and title have yet to be defined. And I happened to see our Prime Minister tonight in Miramichi, New Brunswick, in one of his town halls, and he was asked if he would reopen the Constitution, and he said, not at this time. But I certainly think it's not past time to work on the definitions of rights and title, and they can be further defined. Last week it was announced that there would be a civilian management and advisory oversight board for the RCMP's work. This has been demanded for many years. Now, how many of us have faced such challenges in our first year on the job? But a very good sign of the Commissioner's potential approach to these issues is her comment during the announcement. Commissioner Lucki called it an unprecedented journey that will help guide the RCMP to become more healthy and diverse police force. Brenda Lucki was born and raised in Edmonton, Alberta, and joined the RCMP in August of 1986. During Commissioner Lucki's career, she has served in communities in every part of Canada. In the east and the west and the north and the south, she completed her term as RCMP staff at Commanding Officer of the RCMP Academy Depot Division in Saskatchewan. Her career included several postings on international peacekeeping missions and with the United Nations Protection Force, that's UNPROFOR, when you listen to it on television, in the former Yugoslavia. While serving with UNPROFOR, she had responsibilities to oversee criminal investigations and to monitor the delivery of aid and health services. By 1995, she was transferred to the RCMP peacekeeping program in Ottawa, where she trained and selected peacekeepers for the UN mission in Haiti for a year and a half. Following that role, she advanced through the non-commissioned officers' ranks, first as an instructor at the RCMP Training Academy for 3 years, and then returning to operations in Manitoba for 4 years as a supervisor and acting detachment commander. I remember well the first 34 women who went into the RCMP, and the first question they were asked was, "How are you going to train them?" In 2003, she was promoted to the rank of inspector and held the post of traffic services officer in Saskatchewan. She stayed in that province for 6 years, ending up in the role of community and contract policing and district operations officer. In 2009, she rose to the rank of superintendent and became district commander for the Manitoba North District. As a result of her work on repairing the relationship between the RCMP and First Nations in northern Manitoba, she was appointed as a member of the Order of Merit for the police forces. In 2012, she was transferred and promoted to chief superintendent and became district commander of a larger area in northwest Alberta. In 2016, she was named commanding officer of the RCMP Academy. She was charged with training of all incoming RCMP recruits, a powerful opportunity to begin transforming the culture of the RCMP. On March 9th, 2018, she was announced as the first woman appointed as permanent head of the RCMP. She is the 24th commissioner. Commissioner Lucki completed a Bachelor of Arts in Psychology and Sociology at the University of Alberta in 1996. She also completed the advanced program in Management, Leadership, and Strategy at the Asper School of Business at the University of Manitoba in 2012. She is married. She has 2 stepdaughters and 3 grandchildren. It is my honor to invite Commissioner Brenda Lucki to come to deliver the 8th annual Campagnolo lecture on restorative justice entitled Healing Relationships and Modernizing Policing through Modern Restorative Justice. Please join me in welcoming Commissioner Brenda Lucki. It's a pleasure. Thank you. Thank you.
So I should clear up a few things, because every time I hear that intro, there's a couple things I need to clarify. First, I started when I was 12, so we'll get that out of the way. And second, I can keep a job, okay? Because it sounded like I wasn't able to keep a job.
Those introductions, and think I was drowning.
It's funny, when I got asked to do this, I thought it was going to be like a group of 30, and then when I came in here and saw all the people, and then it's like a blast from the past, because I have to tell you, I've got a few plants in the audience. I've got previous people I've worked with in Grand Prairie, people, previous commanding officer of Newfoundland. I've got my high school biology teacher here. He's up there. It's just like I am kind of getting really nervous here. I've got relatives of my husband that are here. Yeah, they're over there. So all these plants. So now I'm really nervous. So good evening and welcome, and thank you for having me here. I too would like to acknowledge that we are on the traditional territory of the Comox First Nation. And I have to preface, we often say land acknowledgements at so many events without really thinking about what that means. And often we have pre-written scripts to acknowledge the land, but we can and we need to do more. I would like to extend my sincerest appreciation to the Community Justice Center of the Comox Valley for hosting this event. You've actively promoted the principles of restorative justice, showing what peaceful resolution and mutual healing can do for a community. I'd also like to thank the North Island College for providing the venue. The innovation, resourcefulness, and dedication shown by your students, faculty, and staff is simply remarkable. And your commitment to supporting education on Indigenous culture, language, and leadership is something that every post-secondary institution can learn from, and I applaud this. It was truly an honor to be inducted as the Fellow of Community Justice Center earlier this evening. I am both humbled to be alongside some of the most accomplished women in Canadian justice landscape, the Right Honourable Adrienne Clarkson and the Right Honourable Beverly McLaughlin, to name but a few. But I would also like to thank the Honourable Iona Campagnola for her lifelong work advancing women's rights and for her being a strong advocate for the Indigenous people in BC. And for people like yourself, I might not be standing here today. Her unrivaled experience demonstrates what public service means for Canadians, and her accomplishments have provided inspiration for countless women and men across our country. This time last year, the idea of being commissioner of the RCMP seemed more far-fetched, a dream, than a plausible reality. Nevertheless, last spring I was appointed to the position and handed a mandate larger than anything I've ever had to tackle before. And just a little side note, somebody showed me the top law enforcement bloopers, and one of the top ones was my acceptance speech where the poor cadets were falling like flies. It's great to be famous. With that mandate came the expectation of significant change in the RCMP. And I say the word change, and I know that there's a couple of things that members of the RCMP don't like, and that's change in the way things are. So I have a big task ahead of me. But it's change in how we think, how we act, how we connect with Canadians in all communities across this vast country. Amidst all of our hard work and push for change over the past 10 months, I can't help but feel even more proud. Firstly, because of the courageous and skilled Canadians I get to work with, and secondly, because of the incredible efforts we make in each and every community across the country. Comox Valley is one such community. As I've settled into the role of the commissioner, it's become even more clear to me that I could not do this job without the people around me. Having spent 32 years of my life as a Mountie, I thought that I almost knew everything there was to know about the RCMP. But of course, the first day as commissioner proved me otherwise. Lots to learn. While this has been an uncomfortable realization at first, it's been truly a blessing. Each day has presented new opportunities for learning and growth. And I could not be more thankful. I've learned so much from the people around me. At times, the task of leading the RCMP seems so monumental that I questioned why I even took the job in the first place. Between pressure to adjust to the political culture in Ottawa and my own desire to stay down to earth enough to connect with the 30,000 people from coast to coast to coast, RCMP employees who look to me for leadership, the job has had a few stresses, but the mantra throughout for myself has to trust the people around me, never give up, and never give up on the mission to make the RCMP a better RCMP. So as I was thinking about what to say this evening, there was two themes that really resonated with me, and one was trust and the other perseverance. Stood out to me, not only because of my own experiences, but because they are the heart of restorative justice. Trust is the foundation of restorative justice, the entire program, trusting communities to take responsibility for administering their own justice, trusting offenders to reconcile, and trusting that the process will support victim and survivors' healing. Not giving up on people we meet is how restorative justice can make a real difference in people's lives. Be it somebody living on the streets, a disadvantaged youth, or a single mother struggling to get by, the restorative justice process is simply about healing relationships within communities. By providing communities with the policing they need, we can build the trust necessary not only to keep people safe, but to improve their quality of life. The overall arching theme of my mandate as commissioner is modernizing the RCMP. One thing I've learned so far is that modernization is about creating something new. Sometimes it's not about creating something new. Sometimes it's simply about used, tried, and true ways of doing things to provide people with what they need. That's precisely what restorative justice is. Today, I'd like to share with you what restorative justice looks like from a policing perspective. First, the role of police and the RCMP play in restorative justice today. And secondly, how we're modernizing our policing strategies to create a better restorative justice model for the future. First, the role of policing that we play in restorative justice process. Restorative justice has been a part of the RCMP's operational and community policing, especially in Indigenous communities, for decades. While police are only but one part of this process, we have one of the most important roles. We refer the people to the program. We're the first step to the path of reconciliation. We're the first people that are called to the scene when a crime happens, an emergency happens, be it a break and enter, a disturbance, or a petty theft. At this point, police have two opportunities to refer people into the program: before we charge an individual and after they've been charged, but before they're convicted. As long as the offender takes accountability and the victim and offender are both willing and the case can move to restorative justice, then the healing process can begin. While the majority of the cases referred to restorative justice are minor crimes like mischief, we've had many successes under the right circumstances with crimes against the person, like sex assaults, domestic violence, and sexting files with youth. How do police decide what cases are suitable for restorative justice? Officers, they must use their own judgment by asking, first, could it cause further harm if we go through the restorative justice? Police are naturally, by their nature, are very safety conscious. We don't want to see anyone else get further hurt. But if the answer is no, or I don't know, it doesn't hurt to refer the case and let the program decide if it is actually suitable. The RCMP in British Columbia has had the most advanced restorative justice program and framework in the country. Here, the province is on board, so most areas already have well-established restorative justice programs. Corporal Darren Monroe, where is he? There, he's right there in the front, is one of the RCMP's restorative justice experts. He's a restorative justice coordinator and is a member of BC's Divisional Liaison Team, which works with many Indigenous communities to safely resolve conflicts. And over the course of many years in his role, he's encouraged RCMP officers throughout the province to make referrals to the restorative justice program. Together, we identified 4 key factors that contribute to a successful restorative justice program. and Darren uses the acronym ARTBC to help people remember. Awareness, we must make sure detachments are aware a program exists. Relationships, we must formalize a connection between the community and Indigenous programs. Trust and buy-in, we must trust the program and buy into and believe in the philosophy of restorative justice. And the culture, we must look at restorative justice as part of the criminal justice system, not a separate program. Let's take a moment to think about the culture surrounding restorative justice. For police, we don't often recognize restorative justice as a feasible route in our day-to-day work. While restorative justice is a part of police training, not every community supports restorative justice, so some officers may never get the opportunity to use it. As a result, the program can be out of sight, out of mind for many police officers. But this old way of thinking has the potential to shift the criminal justice system as we know it, to reduce crime, improve communities, and save time and money, if we know how to employ its practices and if we believe in the process. Classic Western and Eurocentric thinking has conditioned us to believe that the punishment is the only requisite solution for crime. These punishments come in many forms, such as fines, community service hours, or jail time. As a society and through our criminal justice system, we hand out these punishments all the time, yet we struggle with repeat offenders in countless communities. We don't think twice about charging someone over and over and over again, but we don't often send offenders to restorative justice more than once. Why is that? There's an opportunity to change how we think about things and consider restorative justice in the same way we would consider laying a charge. Many police officers are under the impression that they can't make a referral to the restorative justice program if the defender doesn't have a criminal record or has never gone through the program before. And this is a big misconception that we're trying to change. Studies show that adult prolific offenders will actually have the best results from a restorative justice process because they've never had to face a victim before. Through the system, they've learned that all they have to say is guilty or not guilty, and their lawyer will do the rest. They've never had to take responsibility and face their communities about what they've done, and most are ignorant to the damage that they have caused. Our frontline RCMP officers have seen this firsthand. We've arrested offenders for stealing a flat-screen TV, and they say it's okay because the insurance will pay for it, so no big deal. The family's $300 deductible will get them a new $1,500 TV tomorrow. But the offender actually doesn't see any of the repercussions. They don't see the fact that the kids can no longer sleep through the night because they're scared of the boogeyman coming back into their house. They don't see that the parents will have to get a new alarm system and have to install bars on their windows. They don't see the impact that are suffered by all the neighbors who also will go out and buy alarm systems because they're afraid they're going to get broken into next. The repercussions aren't seen until an offender gets a chance to hear the fallout from their actions. I'm going to give you an example of this. In a northern BC community, there was a man who had more than 50 negative contacts with police over 4 years. This was a man who lived with his mother and his pregnant girlfriend. He gets arrested in 2010 for breach and shoplifting, low-level offenses, no big deal, right? The man immediately admitted to the crime and he said, "Yeah, I did it." The arresting officer recognized that the man was taking accountability, so he recommended that the man be referred to the restorative justice program. When the officer in charge of the unit received the recommendation for this particular offender to go through the restorative justice, he was very, very surprised because the individual was very well known to the detachment and had a lengthy criminal record. When the officer in charge questioned the arresting officer, the officer said, "Actually, sir, I'm referring this man to the restorative justice program because nothing else is working, so why don't we just try something different?" The detachment commander chose to attend the restorative justice circle with the arresting officer and the other members of the community. In the meeting, the constable gave his account of the arrest, noting that the man had been uncooperative and resisting arrest, and he almost spit on the constable. This account added to the detachment commander's surprise that the arresting officer had suggested restorative justice in the first place, and shows that the constable really believed in the restorative justice process and was supported by his detachment. The offender's mother spoke next in the process and addressed her son, and she said, "You've done nothing but cause us problems for our community. You've been nothing but problems for me and your girlfriend. If you keep up this behavior, I'm going to have to ask the elders to ban you from the community." The pregnant girlfriend spoke next. She said, "If you don't get going, if you don't know, I don't know if you're going to live or you're going to die. I don't know if you're going to end up in prison. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't want our kids growing up like this. I agree with your mom. If you don't stop this behavior, I want you to never see your kids again." The officer said that they had never seen a person slump so low with so much shame. The shame was palpable, and his face was almost on the floor. He was so ashamed listening to his mother and his girlfriend talk about him like that, and it was probably the first time he'd ever heard such words. Despite being arrested so many times, he had never been referred to the restorative justice process, so he'd never had to face the consequences of his actions or ever had the chance to repair relationships. After the meeting, the police had 0 negative contacts with that man for the next 4 years. For a general duty member, nothing is more gratifying than hearing, "Thanks for the referral, it worked out great, the offender recognized the harm, and the victim is satisfied." For other officers to hear that, it intrigues them, it piques their interest, and it makes people think of restorative justice as another tool for future cases. While the case from BC is a great example of how restorative justice can work well, it also emphasizes the need for continued support, follow-up, and buy-in into the restorative justice philosophy. So why does restorative justice matter? We need more officers to believe in the program and foster a culture where restorative justice is seen as a valuable way of resolving crime. I don't see restorative justice as an alternative measure. I see it as a complementary measure to the criminal justice system. That's the mindset that we're trying to get more employees in the RCMP to adopt. Instead of asking our officers to justify why they're using restorative justice, as they do now, we should be asking them to explain why they are not using restorative justice. We need to get more people to think restoratively first and foremost, and that's when we can actually make a change in our society. Turning to my second point, how police, specifically the RCMP, are changing how we think about restorative justice. In 2016, the RCMP began revitalizing the program in several ways. First, we're developing a consistent cross-country approach to handle referrals. Before every detachment, province, and territory, they had their own referral that police officers had to fill out to recommend somebody in the restorative justice program. Through a new national referral form, officers in every single division or province can go through the same process and checklist when they send an offender to the program. So it doesn't matter whether they've been transferred to another division or they're new to the process. This will help officers know how to send in a referral, no matter what part of the country they're working in. Sometimes modernization can be that simple. Secondly, we're moving away from police-led restorative justice towards community-run programming. RCMP members are very transient, as you saw from my biography. We move from detachment to detachment, province to province on a regular basis. I know when I move into a community, people often think I'm in the witness protection program. When we take ownership and run those programs, they often stumble when the officers leave, and it happens in almost every type of program that we end up taking on when it becomes people-centric, and especially when it's an RCMP member leading the charge. we usually lose the steam as soon as the member leaves. So by supporting community-led restorative justice, we're not letting anything fall through the cracks because we're trusting the community to support us. Thirdly, we're encouraging members to refer people of all ages and backgrounds, with or without a criminal record, to the restorative justice program. This depends on a community's capacity, of course. We know that many cases are not considered for restorative justice because officers aren't aware of the program. They can't support those many types of offenders. Finally, we're encouraging each detachment to have a restorative justice liaison member in each detachment. In BC, they're doing that in every detachment, but we'd like every detachment to have somebody to be the conduit between the RCMP detachment and the program, and to invite the program in and tell people, this is who we are and this is what we can do for you. As I mentioned earlier, a large part of my mandate is to modernize the RCMP. This goes hand in hand with the RCMP's many commitments, including furthering reconciliation efforts and building stronger nation-to-nation relationships with Indigenous communities. In recent years, the RCMP has taken a closer look at how we are policing Indigenous communities. Expanding our restorative justice program is one major way that we can modernize our policing strategies to be more culturally sensitive. Many of the changes stem from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's final report in 2015. Out of the report's 94 recommendations, 18 are calls to action related to justice. The biggest call to action is to reduce Indigenous overrepresentation in Canadians' justice system. While this is inextricably tied to addressing the social, economic, and educational disparities of Indigenous peoples, this recommendation is something we, the police, can do something about. Overall, Indigenous people now represent 28% of the federally sentenced prison population. That number has reached 40% for federally sentenced women. These numbers are startling when we consider the fact that Indigenous people only account for 5% of the population in Canada. Since the TRC's report was released in 2015, the picture for First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people behind bars has not changed much for both genders. The numbers are higher than they were a decade ago. What can we do about this? Well, first and foremost, we must support the healing of Indigenous people. We must support the healing of the Indigenous offenders. That means diverting them from the criminal justice system and addressing the root causes of that behavior. What better way to achieve this than using the restorative justice process? Providing culturally responsive programs and interventions like restorative justice allows for the rehabilitation of an offender and allows them to successfully reintegrate back into their community. The TRC gave us the opportunity to rethink restorative justice. Previously, police have approached restorative justice from a clinical, methodical standpoint involving a series of achievable steps working towards an end goal. We're kind of process-orientated, us police officers, so we like things that are very succinct. But restoration and reconciliation don't have an end goal or an end date. It's a continuous process. Now we're starting to view restorative justice more as an overarching prevention philosophy. But as police, we can do way more. Provincial and federal governments also play a significant role through their investments and reforms to both social safety nets, the justice system itself. In some jurisdictions, governments are already stepping it up. For instance, recently in Alberta, they doubled their spending on restorative justice programs to $700,000 to fund victim offender conferencing, restorative circle processing, and training for service providers across the province. While this is a positive and a valuable investment, it's worth noting by comparison that New Zealand, which has about as many people as Alberta, spends approximately $9 million on restorative justice each year. I want to talk a little bit about New Zealand. We recently sent Superintendent Kim Taplin, the officer in charge of our National Crime Prevention and Indigenous Policing Services, to New Zealand to meet with their national policing services. Her goal was to look how the New Zealand model, how the New Zealand police are modernizing their policing approach to restorative justice and to prevention and early intervention philosophy. We're now looking at how Canada can learn from those early successes. Like Canada, New Zealand has a tenuous relationship with the Maori Indigenous peoples. Since European settlers colonized the island nation in the 1600s, conflict, land disputes, and mistreatment have plagued the Maori. Also, much like Canada, disproportionate numbers of Maori face significant economic and social obstacles. They have lower life expectancies, lower incomes, and more health problems compared with other New Zealanders. And they suffer higher levels of crime and higher incarceration rates. Maori are one of the most imprisoned minority groups in the world. They represent 15% of New Zealand population, but comprise more than 50% of prison inmates. New Zealand police are aiming to reduce the Maori offending by 25% by focusing on prevention and providing support for victims and their families. Their prevention-first national operation model relies on the fundamental principle of avoiding victimization in the first place by placing victims at the center of their policing. The police service has seen that providing early supports and wraparound services in the pre-crime space is incredibly important, especially when those supports help the total family unit. Social investment, which addresses the drivers of crime, are key. Their strategy has several objectives, which the RCMP is hoping to take inspiration from our Canadian reality. The first part is prevention, reducing the number of people from vulnerable groups in the criminal justice system by looking how we reduce the harm in the pre-crime space. New Zealand officers use something called eyes wide open response, where officers are encouraged to respond to domestic calls even when a crime has not taken place. For calls like this, they recognize that there's an opportunity to take time and effort to understand the root causes of the issues and connect individuals with appropriate support services before the problem even gets worse. The second objective is reducing the recidivism, making sure fewer people reoffend and re-enter the system. This again leads back to addressing the root causes of the behavior and offering resources early on. And the third objective is changing the behavior. This is done by using an out-of-court resolution process similar to restorative justice. We can change behavior more effectively if we learn to embrace cultural differences and deliver services tailored to these differences. New Zealand police encourage a values-first, process-second approach when dealing with Maori peoples. This makes officers consider what other factors may be in play before charging an individual. In the RCMP context, we're focusing our efforts on empathy. One of our core values is actually compassion, and I often say that compassion is not good enough. We need to take ourselves and put ourselves in the position of others, in another person's shoes. And I ask myself, can empathy be taught? And I would have never said yes until most recently when I was the commanding officer of the training academy. I got the opportunity to take the blanket exercise, and which teaches you empathy and learning about Indigenous people and how they arrived in Canada and some of the challenges that they faced throughout their history. We've incorporated this blanket exercise into the cadet training program at Depot, and I can tell you it's a very, very powerful experience, having gone through it myself. Another thing, when we think of empathy and we think of people first, often we need to, our model right now and our problem-solving model talks about meeting clients' needs. And I think probably if Costco had that as a tagline, they might not be in business for very long. So I think meeting clients' needs isn't enough. So we need to look at it from a business perspective and look at it as providing exceptional customer service rather than just simply meeting people's needs. For the New Zealand police to support their strategy, they've created an iPhone app. Yes, all of their police officers have cell phones. Which they use those phones. They have a list of community resources in each district. And this is something that we're looking at adapting, the platform, not the iPhone, but we'll get there. We often do in Saskatchewan, they use a hub model that's very similar, and they take one case at a time, and all the multiple agencies go around the room and deal with one individual and see how they can make a difference through housing, health, education, and law enforcement. So, as a new member on the job, looking forward, on your first shift, you're handed a map, a set of keys, and a radio. What you don't get on your first day is a list of resources and connections to the community. At DEPO, at our training academy, we've taught to seek out, we teach the cadets to seek out elders, community centers, friendship centers in the community where you're working. But as a new member, it can be hard to have the time to reach out and build those bridges. To make those connections easier, we're using what's called geospatial technology to build an online resource of community profiles that will provide our employees with real-time access to local supports. So picture you have Google Maps, but it's tailored to help us carry out restorative justice and early interventions and support. As a pilot, we're in the process of mapping our detachments and layering all the information from Indigenous and Northern Affairs Canada, Justice Canada, Friendship Centers across the country, and this information will be made much more available at the officer's fingertips, providing easy access to intervention resources, which will inevitably prevent more crimes from happening because the offenders are connected to the help that they need. Having a resource map could also support newly transferred members, probably help them not get lost, as well as reservist and relief officers who may be coming into an area with little knowledge of local existing resources. For example, in May 2016, when we had the horrific fires in Fort McMurray, RCMP members from all over Canada were urgently responding to forest fires, and many additional employees were called to help coordinate the evacuation of the city, assist with directing traffic, and support residents who found themselves stranded in temporary shelters. So having the resource map available to incoming officers could help them connect people to community and family supports faster, especially in times of emergency. Using technology like this can help us bring restorative justice into the 21st century and modernize our policing. The government is also proposing changes that will cascade down to the police jurisdictions across the country and encourage more referrals to restorative justice. We have Bill C-75 proposes several amendments to the criminal code, the Youth Criminal Justice Act, and many other acts to modernize criminal justice practices and procedures. And should this bill pass, it would require peace officers to consider the circumstances of the accused persons who are Indigenous or members of vulnerable, marginalized populations. Restorative justice referrals could become a critical tool for police under this potential new legislation. And again, I'm talking about empathy. Using restorative justice logic, we know the best way to eliminate harm is to look at where the influences of crime start. The New Zealand Police Services offer us excellent case studies showing that the prevention first thinking and what it means when it comes to working with such offenders. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission calls to action, combined with looking at all the best practices around the world, has prompted RCMP to take a closer look at our restorative justice practices and rethink our program and what our program could look like in the future. So before I wrap this up, I would like to share with you something that an elder shared with me when I was attending the police hearings for the murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls national inquiry this past fall. And she often said in Anishinaabe, it's called Mino Modzabin, which means living your life in a good way. While this is a fulsome sentiment to live by, it's also something that the RCMP can embody in our day-to-day work, shifting policy frameworks towards a wellness-centered model of living our life in a good way reminds us to consider the perspectives of other people, and it goes back to empathy. It encourages us to have compassion and practice that empathy for those who are different from us. And by remembering this, the RCMP can begin changing how we implement programs and how we approach situations based on local needs, customs, cultures, and resource. Restorative justice is just one example about living your life in a good way, and it shows communities that their stories matter. It teaches people to express themselves in healthy, constructive ways. It humanizes both sides, and it allows victims and offenders to understand each other. Restorative justice is not necessarily the answer to all of our policing problems, but it does identify the psychological and the environmental issues that prompt people to act out and commit crimes. It embodies the idea that we should never give up on any person, and it inspires us to connect with people and make communities stronger, make communities more resilient. One officer, one referral to restorative justice program can make a difference in someone's life. And that's the mantra that I live by, and it's something that I remind each and every single member I work with. And I always say that one member and one employee can make a difference, but every member or every employee should try. Miigwech, merci, thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Before I read from my prepared remarks, I'm just going to annoy Bruce and make a couple of comments. One of the things that I've learned, I'm Doug Hillian, by the way, city councillor, former probation officer. I've worked in the field of criminal justice for most of my adult life. And one of the things that I've learned is that we don't always know about the impact of even minor crimes on people who have been affected by them. And in that spirit, I just want to acknowledge that the demonstration that happened earlier tonight would have been troubling for many of the people here. And without diminishing the intensity of the feelings of the people involved or the complexity of the issues that need to be resolved, I just want to acknowledge that if there's anybody here who felt disturbed by that and needs to talk about it afterwards, feel free to stay behind. And some of us will make sure that we're here for you. The other thing I want to say is that I think we need to appreciate the members from the audience who stepped up and ensured that we had a peaceful conclusion to the demonstration to enable us to continue on with the event tonight. And I just wanted to acknowledge that. So I'd like to thank Commissioner Lucki for her remarks this evening. They're insightful and informative and have significantly added to the remarkable legacy of the Campagnola lectures. The Commissioner has graciously allowed time for audience questions on the subject of her talk this evening, and I will help facilitate that process. Because of the wide range of issues that fall within the ambit and responsibility of the RCMP Commissioner, we would like to limit the questions to those within the scope of this evening's presentation. When we call for questions, there'll be two volunteers in the aisleways. I would ask you to come forward to where the volunteer is. And they'll actually, as is common at events like this, they'll continue to hold the mic in a position that will allow you to speak and to be heard. And so I'll just ask for your patience with that, and we'll try and make sure that everybody who has something to ask gets that opportunity in the limited time that we have available. So, who has the microphones? Where are our volunteers? And our patron, Iona Campagnola, has just acknowledged that she will have to leave, and we certainly appreciate you being here tonight. Thanks so much. Sure, yep.
Thank you so much.
So you're going to be up still? Sure.
I will. Thank you.
All right, who has the first question tonight? If you raise your hand, in the woman in the second row down here, please, if you could just step out to the aisle. And if you could say your name, that would be helpful.
Hello, my name is Christy Bell. I'm here, I work with Rachel Blaney, but this is a question from a different role I play. So I've done a lot of work in British Columbia with the Aboriginal Justice Council and with the Native Court Workers and Counseling Association. And there's been tons of conversations and different funding streams and a lot of work happening on the ground with implementing GLADU properly, hopefully, in British Columbia. And I'm curious your thoughts on how you would be able to integrate that, the GLADU principles, into the work of the RCMP.
That's a great question. I think anytime we can take programs and put them together to make it more successful, I think it has to be looked at. Often we take programs in isolation and run with them like we would restorative justice, but I think we have to study that model a bit better and put the two together and see what's duplicated, what's not duplicated, see where one process can complement the other, and probably that's going to be something that Darren's going to look at. So we should be asking him that question in about 6 months when he gets it all done.
If I can just add, the people who work in the youth justice system, we're trying to encourage them to proactively use GLADU, even where it may not be ordered by the courts. And I think that's something that we can encourage among our police forces as well, because oftentimes we have programs that are available, but as the commissioner says, don't necessarily get implemented because not everybody has the skills or perhaps the knowledge to take them forward.
That's a great point.
Yeah. Gentleman halfway up.
Hi, my name is Steve Smith. You mentioned at least once, possibly a couple other times, about programs that would lose steam when officers would leave the community. You talked about officers being sent to various communities and knowing little, if nothing at all, in regards to what is going on in that community. So my question is, why does the RCMP policy move people all over this country all the time?
Well, first of all, it's out of necessity in many cases because there's many communities that we have that are what we call limited duration postings, given the type of amenities that are there for the members, but also some communities are so small that there aren't promotional opportunities for those members. So if they would like to move up the ranks, then they have to leave the community. Also, depending on their family concerns and the type of, if they have kids with health issues or they're taking care of an elderly parent, some of the smaller communities might not be amenable to their family situation. So often early in their career, they're able to go to certain communities and then they sometimes like to go to a bigger center where more career opportunities are available. So what we have to do is, in any of the programming that we look at, we always like to be involved, but we try to move the sort of the control of the program either to the school or to a community-based program where we can very strongly support the program, but that we're not running the program.
So it's coming from the people in those communities that would like another opportunity as opposed to being a top-down policy?
Yeah, well, most of the restorative justice programs that I've been that I've had experience with are community-centered, and it's a lot. It ends up to be a lot stronger program. We always have a role in it because we're part of the circle when it comes to that, and we always participate in the actual process. But usually it's community-run, and often in many provinces it is actually supported through resourcing.
I think maybe the questioner wanted to clarify where the initiative for movement of staff comes from. And you'd initially said that oftentimes it's the circumstances of the individuals involved, which is probably a change from over the years from what it might have been like 20 or 30 years ago.
Well, we've always been a mobile police agency, and having members from coast to coast to coast makes, and it's one of the beauties of the RCMP. It's actually the reason I joined, so I could see many, many parts of Canada. But it's not something that's actually changed more or less in the years. Obviously, generally speaking, people are becoming more urbanized, but we're still policing in small rural communities throughout the country. So we'll always have that rotation of bringing people in the northern areas back down to the south, and that's been going on for years.
How about over on this side so we can give both our fine volunteers a chance to work? Gentleman right up at the back, top of the stairs.
Hi. Okay, so my name is Kieran McCluskey. I was wondering what you think the RCMP's greatest challenge will be in fully completing this restorative justice initiative.
Well, in general, I think moving forward is changing our culture and transforming the RCMP to be a more modern, more inclusive, and more diverse organization that is reflective of the communities that we serve. And in that, we've planned out a 5-year, well, a multi-year plan. We call it Vision 150, because in 5 years the RCMP will be 150 years old. And it's based on people first. And when I say people first, it's not just the people within our organization, it's the people of our communities. So we have to work with our communities and our members and employees to make sure that our police agency is reflective to the trends and the modernization. So that's going to be it's a big challenge, because we're not a canoe, like 2 strokes of a paddle, we're not going to be changing, right? We're a big, like a big tanker. So it's going to take a good, fulsome plan, but I think also with that plan, we have to be accountable to the public and to our own employees. So we plan on doing that, because I find in the years of service that I have, the only thing that gets done are the things that you measure. So we have to make sure we have good tracking mechanisms, and we have to communicate all of that to the public so that they too will increase their trust in our ability to serve their communities.
We'll take somebody over here. Gentleman in the second row.
Good evening. It was good to hear your presentation. When you were talking about some of the core issues of recidivism, I think from First Nations, it goes back to residential schools. When I take a look at all the trauma that people went through, and through that trauma, they get into the alcohol and the drugs and end up in the jail systems and going cycling in and out of the jail systems. And we have alcohol and drug treatment centers, but they don't do the job for treating the trauma. Many people that went through residential schools got either sexually or physically abused, and I think a lot of those things require long-term treatment. In my community, I'm working on treating the trauma because we send too many people off to alcohol and drug treatment centers, and they come back and they're only sober, clean for 2 hours, maybe 2 days, and they're back at it again. The records get pretty long. I worked at the court workers for years, and I've seen people go through that whole cycle, and it really didn't change anything until we can give them a chance to have some stable sobriety, stable clean time, and then they can start to build themselves up. I think it's important that we get there because if you give the people the opportunity to heal, then that's the reconciliation. Without that, they're not reconciled. Their potential is diminished. And during my time at the court workers, we often dealt with the negativity. We were always dealing with the negativity of people that were in trouble all the time. And even as a liaison between the court system and the people, we started to feel negative towards our own people. So they took time out and said, we have to go back and look at what's good in our people. So we took a retreat to kind of recharge ourselves. I'm wondering if the RCMP would do something like that, because in my own community, I see them coming out, and I hear about how negatively they view my community. I think it's important that you take the time out to start to recharge so that it's not all negativity. Thanks.
Yeah, we're doing a lot of steps in the road to reconciliation. And like I said, one of the things is when we talk about compassion, it's not enough. We have to look at empathy. So bringing in the blanket exercise, for example, at the cadet training program is one step. In each division, we have what's called Indigenous awareness programs, where they will get a 1 week program where people come in and speak. They'll be get an opportunity to do some of the, learn about the customs, their traditions, and how their interactions can be better improved in the Indigenous communities. So there's no one solution, but we definitely have to keep on the road to ensuring that our members, whatever culture they're dealing with, everybody has a history, and each individual person has a history. So taking the time to try to put themselves in those people's shoes maybe will make the interaction a bit better, having that understanding. When you talk about the trauma of Indigenous people, and I completely agree with you, when we look at putting people through addictions, recovery and all that, if we don't get to the root causes of the problem, then it can be just a vicious cycle, like you said, a couple hours later. It's even worse in some of the northern communities where there is no addictions counseling, so they actually have to leave. Maybe, in smaller communities, it's one thing to leave your small community, but to stay in the region. But in some areas, they have to go all the way down south, and the chance of success in an environment that's unfamiliar and that is very tempting with other, parts of life that they're not accustomed to, it's not a very good way to try to make things and try to make a person successful in their recovery. So those root issues are extremely, extremely important. I completely agree with you. Those are excellent points.
Mayor Wells, do you still have a question? I did notice you.
I thought maybe you were going to hold it against me, but thanks very much, and thanks very much for your presentation tonight. It was amazing. My question, like the thing that I found, it sounds like most of the people in here probably drinking the Kool-Aid, we're kind of all on the same page. It's how do we move that dial? And one of the things I heard you say when we compare ourselves, say, with New Zealand and the funding model, how do we get the funding, which I think will, the rest will, like that's one of the cruxes to move it forward. And so who do we talk to about that?
Well, I think everybody needs to be an advocate, but I think it's also about changing the narrative and bringing, when we have those conversations, bringing it back to the results. Because if we have good results in many communities, and we just don't talk about them very often, and we have, like the one example I gave, it's just but one example. So recently, though, the federal government has invested, so it's going to be exciting to be able to work and forward some of those initiatives. And hopefully some of those, as a result of that funding, some of the results will speak for themselves. And if we can show how we can reduce funding on one side, like inside the correction centers, versus the rehabilitation and the restoration, that will speak volumes.
We have time for a couple more. Andrew up at the top.
Hello, my name is Andrew Stringfellow. I was wondering what kind of programs that you have for, I've noticed, I've had some friends who are members, and the stress involved in that, just in this encounter tonight, could be, tremendous. So what are you doing to make sure that those people are supported?
That's a great question. We have a, a mental health strategy, first of all, which we are increasing our operational stress injury programs and putting them in all major cities. We're looking at programs such as a FaceTime type of psychologists online for the more remote areas. We have a PTSD study going on, a longitudinal study that's starting with our cadets in training, because what we need to try to figure out is the root causes of the issues. So if we can find the root causes of PTSD, for example, then I think we'll be better at the preventative measures. We've added a periodic psychological health assessment with the members' periodic health assessment, so maybe early indicators. We've increased our peer-to-peer program. We've increased our support programs, and we've had all members, all employees, all 30,000 employees take a road to mental readiness training, so that they can. There's a supervisor's training, and then there's just an employee's training, so that supervisors are more aware of the signs and symptoms when members are troubled. We do way more critical incident stress debriefings when there's major incidents, and I think we're getting better, but our whole mental health strategy has to be very fulsome, because there's a lot of members that when they go through incidents, they compartmentalize it, and they compartmentalize it, and they compartmentalize it, and then all of a sudden something triggers it, and we have to figure out how to stop the triggers from happening and making sure they're healthy.
We have time for one more. Serena?
Hi, my name is Serena Atwood, and I just have a question about a safe drug supply as prevention for crime, being that people don't have to steal if the safe injection sites are able to supply safe drugs, and they don't have to, undignify themselves by selling their bodies or other things. And I wanted to know the RCMP's position on that. And the other question or thought I had, and wanted your comment, and thank you for your presentation, was just in terms of hearing, like, why do people commit these crimes? Like, you hear they're bored or that they want to belong to a gang. And I've noticed in this town there's a number of senior citizen centers. When people are 55, they can go, and there's activities all day, and it's basically like almost free. And there's not a lot of crime by the senior citizens here. So I'm thinking maybe, I don't think so. I'm thinking like they should maybe have those for the youth, and a place where it's not just sports, but it's also crafts, it's also, you can learn languages, you can play cards, different games, just like the seniors do. But because it seems like people need life. Like, if you're not going to destroy things, you need to have some kind of enjoyable life, right?
Yes, absolutely. In regards to your first question, we absolutely support such sites. We're not the initiators of it. It's usually the municipalities or the provinces, depending on that. So I can't speak specifically to how that happens or who's responsible. We We simply support it and help enable it if we can. You're right. When kids are bored, things happen. We really notice if you, like in policing, the beginning of the summer is everything's good, and then as it gets closer to school, the kids get bored and we get busy. And while the parents are in Staples doing the happy dance, getting the school supplies, we are doing the sad dance, trying to keep care of the kids that are getting bored. Structure obviously is a good thing, and the more structure we can have within the youth, the better. And just programming, and we have all kinds of programming. The RCMP initiates a lot of programming, but I think it has to be a partnership between the community and the police and the various agencies, social services, the schools. No one agency can do it by themselves. And I think the more programming you have, and it's also about programming that isn't directly in regards to youth. For instance, good parenting programs for people that are struggling in that area. We need people to be able to hold their kids to account and have that good parenting skills. So it's sort of multi-pronged, and the more we can keep the kids busy, the easier it is for us. Absolutely. And we'll have to watch out for those seniors.
Well, I'm actually a volunteer at the Community Justice Center, and you would be surprised that we do get a number of seniors coming in. Not just to volunteer.
Yeah.
So I'd just like to thank Commissioner Lucki for handling the questions. I'd like to thank the members of the audience for posing them and our volunteers. And I'd like to call upon the Justice Center Administrator, Bruce Curtis, to come up and thank Commissioner Lucki and bring to an end this 8th Annual Campagnola Lecture.
Thank you. Ooh. Thank you, Doug, for leading that question and answer session. As we come to the close of yet another successful Campagnola lecture, I want to express our deep appreciation to Commissioner Lucki for her time and gracious acceptance of the invitation to be our 8th annual lecturer. This evening's lecture has enabled us to see some of the program of reform being led by Commissioner Lucki. It has contributed to our understanding of how the modernizing of police bodies will work for the future of restorative justice. And it has extended our conversation in our community about the practice of restorative justice. And that is what the annual lecture series is all about. Over the years, we have been exploring the role and impact of restorative justice as it relates to mental health, to community engagement, to court-based justice, to individual growth and development, and to the justice system's impact on young people. This evening's presentation has raised important ideas about what its renewed place in Canada's system of policing ought to be. When officers are approaching the scene of an incident, there are so many things that can go wrong in a heartbeat. But I believe that as restorative justice becomes inculcated across police forces and police culture undertakes the healing work needed to restore respectful relationships among the officers and staff, as well as between the forces and the communities they serve, we will be taking huge steps forward in the creation of a safe and genuinely civil society. And if this has sparked a deeper interest in what you can do for further work towards restorative society, let me say that it's not too late to volunteer at the Community Justice Center and or make a substantial financial donation to our programs. We accept checks in denominations of $5,000 and up. And if you would like to receive advance notification of the 2020 Campagnola Lecture and who it is, the surprise will be disclosed. You can leave your name and email address on the sheets in the table in the lobby of the theater. And now, in appreciation of Commissioner Lucki's time and energy in presenting this year's Campagnola Lecture on restorative justice, please join me in expressing again our thanks and sincere appreciation to Commissioner Lucki. This brings to a close our 8th annual lecture. We've not yet finalized the choice of the 9th annual lecture next winter or early next spring, but it promises to be a significant and important event for your 2020 calendar. Look for notices and be assured that you will be warmly welcomed into the Restorative Justice family. And if you would like an email notification, put your name on the list outside. Thank you, and here's my last lesson that I got just at the end of my class on Kwakwala Tuesday. Halakasla. Goodbye, and travel safely.